alert for Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon was the literal definition of an Oscar movie, in my opinion. I feel like not many sane people would sit down for a 3.5 hour blockbuster, but here I am reviewing the movie. Let's start off with some cons. Let's get this one out of the way pretty quickly. It was 3 hours and 30 minutes. That's like watching Finding Nemo back to back. So yeah, it was pretty long, but even with the long movie, there were some parts that could have been cut out. But I think most of the scenes needed to be there. And this isn't really a con in the movie, but the most emotional scene in the movie. Picture this real quick. Most emotional scene in the movie. The best performance in the movie from DiCaprio and Gladstone, and Braxton farts, drawing all my attention to him and his selfish self. Even though this could be an Oscar movie, it certainly had a lot of cringy moments, like the spanking of DiCaprio, and even Brendan Fraser yelling out "dumb boy," just one of the worst dialogues ever. Dumb boy. Now for some pros, it was a beautiful picture. The camera work was great as well. I noticed that for every death, it was used as a Steadicam, which maximizes all the space around it. And then when the bomb went off at Bill and Rita's house, they used a shaky cam, and that was just overall scary. We as audience members were placed in the shoes of Ernest and Molly, as parents not knowing what's going on, and I loved it. Scorsese also had a lot of other creative choices, like early in the movie, when Ernest was picking up Molly as a chauffeur, he created chaos with music, cars, and horses, drawing our attention away from Ernest, just to show us how much white. Scorsese also did something interesting when the Osage were speaking to each other in their native tongue. This was when the Americans were in the room. Usually without Americans nearby, the Osage would have subtitles. But with the Americans, they don't understand what they're saying. So why should we? I also noticed that when Ernest was giving the last couple of doses of poison to Molly, half of his face was in darkness and half was in light, symbolizing how he was literally trying to kill his wife, but also having that goodness still inside of him. Finally, apart from the actors, I really enjoyed the ending. You know how most based on true stories have like white letters on black screen saying, "This is what happened, this is what happened." Well, Scorsese did something entirely different and so creative. He basically broke the fourth wall to remind us of the main point of the movie, the Osage people. I feel like the plot was generally easy to follow, especially as a true crime story. It kept my attention as well as it could. If you need a one-phrase summary of this movie, it's a story about Indian oppression by white Americans. The first time we see the Osage, they refuse to shake the hand of a white man. Later, we see that Osage aren't very thrilled about the whites taking over their culture. Whites are basically scamming the Osage, if you think about it, taking pictures and chauffeuring people around for money. Another moment was when the Osage gave a great speech, and then Robert De Niro just had to one-up him and give a speech of his own. Bill was also another instance of whites just being the worst people ever at the time. All he wanted was the money, and he didn't care which sister he had to shack up with to get it. There was a lot of symbolism and imagery in this movie. A line in this movie that I remember was when someone said, I forget who, but they were like, the Osage name can never be taken away from you, which is ironic because their culture is getting taken away from them. Another line was when someone said, our blood's getting white, which is literally and figuratively what was happening. Literally how the Osage are marrying white men and adopting their culture, and figuratively how the Osage are having children with white blood within them. Finally, the visualization of the afterlife in heaven, when Molly's mother was on her deathbed, was very interesting. I liked the owl and how her mother saw the family who had already died to silence too. Just overall, really unique. Alright, one of the best thing about this movie, the actors, specifically the big three. Lily Gladstone was a surprisingly good addition to this movie, Whether she be playing a dying, poisoned wife or a grieving sister, all of the emotions were released whenever she was on the screen. Also, who better to play the mafioso of Osage than the literal Godfather himself? I mean, if you cast Robert De Niro in a role, you can rarely ever go wrong. I said rarely. And finally, finishing off with Leonardo DiCaprio. Throughout the whole movie, he just had this disgusted look on his face the whole time. It was like a frown. Like, I can't even do it. He had this vibe of looking for trouble, and it totally worked. And then he did a full 180 at some points and showed emotion that really hit home. The Bill-Leo interaction scene was just really amazing. Just the little things that he does are so good. During that interaction, he just like kept looking down and back up and back down. And that just added to the overall uneasiness of the scene. Let me finish this review by saying that it takes a special actor to keep the screen on them for 5 minutes during a court scene and not cutting away. Leonardo DiCaprio, he deserves an Oscar nomination for this movie, at the least. As for the grades, Jason gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Braxton also gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 7.9 out of 10, or a 79 out of 100, which is right behind Saw X on the drama horror thriller scale. And you can't quite compare the two because they're two entirely different movies. The next movie that I'll be reviewing is a movie in between a rated R horror movie and a kids movie. You're so